Hello, this is Mr. Sarosy, and thank you for taking the time to watch the following video, which aims to update the LHS community on the anticipated and much discussed changes to graduation requirements in New York State. First, it is important to know that educational policy is created at the state level, and New York's governing body for public education is called the New York State Education Department, or NYSED for short. The leadership of NYSED consists of our Commissioner of Education, who's currently Betty Rosa, and a 19-person board called the Board of Regents, who are elected by our state legislators. Long Island's representative on the Board of Regents is currently Roger Tillis. This information is important because the changes we're about to discuss were originated and currently sit at this level. The requirements to graduate from high school today are not radically different than they were when our current parents and staff members went through high school for themselves. Basically, students need to complete 22 credits of study, which are specifically broken down in the following ways. Similarly, students today also need to pass 4 Regents exams and 1 additional pathway, which for the majority of our students is passing a 5th Regents exam. A number of years ago, the state began to create alternative pathways for students who struggled to meet the Regents assessment requirement. Critics of New York's current graduation requirements believe that it is too much of a one-size-fits-all model and does not account for individual students' needs. To address this, State Ed created the Blue Ribbon Commission and asked them to create additional ways for students to demonstrate their proficiency rather than through Regents exams alone. The 4 recommendations that follows are what they came up with. First, the state is going to adopt its new portrait of a graduate to align New York learning standards with the 21st century skills that our students need. The first proposed transformation is well underway as New York State is looking to adopt their portrait of a graduate, which identifies 21st century skills determined to be the most important. Last year, Lynbrook schools took part in a district-wide initiative where all stakeholders identified the skills that we locally believe are the most important and created our own profile of the owl. As you can see, there is significant overlap between what New York State has identified and what we here in Lynbrook have identified as priorities. Now we can go back and look specifically at the timeline of the remaining 3 proposed transformations and how they will impact current and future LHS students. It's very important to note that the Board of Regents has not officially approved any of these changes, but given the tone of the meetings, that seems like a formality. If anything does change from this anticipated timeline, we will be sure to communicate that to our school community. Before we get into specifics, let's give a quick summary of what we're about to discuss. First, Regents exams are not going away. In fact, they will continue to be offered in many classes, just like they are now. What will be different is that instead of passing a specific number of Regents exams being the only way to show proficiency and graduate, they will now be just one of many ways to show proficiency and graduate. Historically, LHS students have done very well on Regents exams. Last year, 90% of test takers passed Regents exams at LHS. The expectation that students prepare for and perform well on Regents exams will continue here in Lynbrook. These proposed changes do move away from the one-size-fits-all system and will give LHS the ability to work with students who struggle to show their proficiency through examinations. This next slide is one that we'll spend some time on, and it's important to point out that it's been locally created and not official communication from NYSED. The information's been gathered from attending several forums that have been held, as well as the frequently asked question portion of the NYSED website, which has proven to be a valuable resource to reference. This document has evolved throughout the process, and it's going to continue to do so as more information becomes available from New York State. Some important items to point out before we begin. First, please note that all changes to current graduation requirements are in bold print in the right-hand column. Also, when referencing a student cohort, we don't reference their graduation year. We reference the year that they enter 9th grade. For example, the 2024 cohort are this year's freshmen, since they entered high school this past fall. And lastly, the yellow highlights signified what grade current students will be in when Regents exams cease to be a requirement for graduation, thus opening the door for students to show proficiency in different ways. For students currently in grades 10, 11, and 12, there are no significant changes. The state has given schools the ability to exempt students from the Regents examination requirement based on experiencing a major life event, but little detail has been provided on what would qualify as such. For the majority of our students, they will continue to work towards 22 credits and fulfilling the 4+1 Regents exam pathway that we discussed earlier. Students who successfully complete these two requirements will earn one of three diploma types. So the members of the class of 2025, 2026, and 2027 will be awarded either a local, a Regents, or an advanced Regents diploma. Again, for our current sophomores, juniors, and seniors, little will change in regard to graduation. Graduation requirements do begin to change with our current ninth grade students, and in fact, students currently in grades 9, 8, and 7 are grouped together for the purpose of this discussion. All of the students in those years will need to complete 22 credits and continue to take Regents exams in classes that offer them. However, instead of three diploma types, all current ninth graders and students that are younger will earn one New York State diploma. The current 7th, 8th, and ninth grade students are in this transition period where they will be required to sit for Regents exams, but are not required to pass them to graduate. It's important to highlight again that even after these changes take effect, it is anticipated that the majority of students in Lynbrook High School will continue to graduate high school by displaying their proficiency by passing Regents exams. We anticipate this transition period is going to cause some confusion, and we will continue to communicate with members of our school community. As always, the most direct way to address a question you have is to either call the main office and speak to an administrator, or call the guidance department and speak with a counselor. The next significant change occurs when the current 6th graders enter LHS in the fall of 2027. That is when the diploma assessment requirement will sunset for all students in high school, and this means every student in the building at that time. Also, and perhaps most significantly, and something that we've been keeping a very close eye on, this is when the state says that credits will be redefined. What this means exactly is still to be seen, but it seems that credits will be banded together differently than they are now. For instance, instead of a student needing 4 English and 4 social studies credit, the state could say that they may need 8 humanities credits. Much more information is needed on this, and we're awaiting instruction from state ed. The final change takes place when the current 4th grade students enter LHS in the fall of 2029, and that's when all public schools in New York will be required to use a uniform transcript instead of their locally created ones. So to summarize the main points of this presentation, we can ask the following questions. Will students continue to take Regents exams? The answer is yes. Students will continue to take Regents exams in classes that offer them. What will Regents exams count for? For the significant majority of LHS students, passing a certain number of Regents exams will continue to be how they show proficiency and meet graduation requirements. Why is it important to prepare for Regents exams and to do your best? Regents exams are still part of your student record and appear on your LHS transcript. As your plans for the future after graduation come into focus, students will continue to want their transcript to be as strong as possible. Who is going to be most impacted by these changes? For students who have struggled to show their proficiency by passing Regents exams, these new changes will give some students in high school alternative ways to meet graduation requirements. So what comes next is a question that's getting a lot of attention. The first thing that needs to happen is that the Board of Regents officially adopts the Blue Ribbon Commission recommendations. After that, we expect to have more specific guidance from State Ed on the rollout of these initiatives. We will then take a close look at that information and see how it will impact current and future students at LHS, and continue to navigate these changes with the students' best interest in mind. Thank you very much for taking the time to watch, and please reach out if you have any questions.